Hello, everyone, and welcome to AI Sweden's Trend Seminar 2026. My name is Astrid Sjögren, and normally I am the head of initiatives regarding small and medium-sized businesses and the innovation ecosystem here at AI Sweden. But today, and actually for the third year in a row, I have the honor of hosting the seminar together with Daniel Gillblad, who is the senior advisor at AI Sweden, as well as the chief of AI at Recorded Future.
Great to be here.
Happy to have you here yet again.
Yes.
And today we have an action-packed agenda for you, and we're hoping to give you a lot of new information, a lot of trends, of course. And actually this year we're also welcoming questions from you in the audience. So we are super happy to receive questions in the Q&A where you can type them in. So don't be afraid, and you can ask them throughout the whole seminar, both to our panelists and speakers, but also in a general Q&A session at the very end. So Daniel, what are you looking forward to in today's seminar?
Well, a little bit cutting through the chatter. We hear so much about AI today. There are so many people talking about it, but what is actually important in all of these very general, but super important global trends, basically. Getting to the point, what actually matters.
All right, so no pressure to all our panelists and speakers. Get to the point. That's the message. So the people we're going to meet today are divided into three sections because we have three themes today. The first one is going to be a panel about geopolitics and the de-globalization of AI. And there we're going to listen to Malin Frenning from RISE. We're going to listen to Irene Ek from Google and Ödjad Andersson from Sensact, who will be more thoroughly introduced when we start the panel. After that, we have the pleasure of having Professor Amy Lutfi with us. That's going to talk about embodied AI. And then lastly, our third theme of the day is going to be agents. And for that, we have Aron Lagerberg from Recorded Future to give us a little keynote on that topic. Perfect. But these three trends have not been selected at random. We have actually put a little bit of work into figuring out what to pick. And it hasn't only been me and Daniel. We've also had our very own Mauricio Munoz, who's a senior research engineer at AI Sweden. So I would like to invite Mauricio into the conversation because I wanted to dig a little bit into why were these trends selected and how come these are what we feel is more important to talk about rather than other topics. So Mauricio, could you just tell us a little bit about which trends you were choosing between and what do you actually find interesting right now?
It was definitely a packed year. I think for me, I would choose a couple things from basically everything that's been going on. The real highlight for me, I think, has been how good models have been getting at the natural sciences, especially performance on mathematics tasks. It's really, really amazing to watch. I think it was Jeff Dean he was giving a seminar at Stanford a couple of months ago, and he basically highlighted, a couple of years ago, not even 3 years ago, these models were struggling on high school level math. And now, in the last year, everybody probably heard the news that the top tier models have won at the gold at the mathematics Olympiads. So it's this sort of really quantum leap that is just accelerating so quickly that it just dazzles my mind. And I think for me, this is the big takeaway from this year.
Would you concur with that, Daniel, or do you have any other trends that come to mind?
Oh, definitely. And I think that we're also going to talk a little bit about some of these things that have been with us now for some time. AI for science, agent systems, agentic systems, embodied intelligence, these kinds of things. We could have talked about them last year. We can probably talk about them a little bit next year as well. And I think this is kind of indicative of the area. It's sort of maturing to some of these areas where we can really see huge potential and begin to see huge value. So all of these things will, of course, continue to drive. And it's really based on what AI can really provide now, not necessarily just speculation about what it can provide and do, but real value. So I think some of these trends will be with us for some time, but it's going to be huge development within each one of them.
We had agents and agentic systems as a theme last year as well.
True.
How come it made it to the podium this year too?
I think that just last year, it was a little bit more speculative. What will these agent and agentic systems actually look like? I think that during last year, and especially, let's take the end of last year, when we had new models from some of the frontier labs together with, for example, these kinds of coding tools and things like that, really proving that we're sort of reached a bit of a tipping point. They've gotten good enough to start solving real problems on a really, really large scale, basically. So they're really providing real value. And all of a sudden, for example, within software engineering, we have to start thinking about, so this profession is going to change profoundly. What does it look like now? Because these tools are not just autocomplete anymore. They're more autonomous. They're more agentic. They can actually do what we're looking for. And we're really looking forward to, during the next years, basically, so how do we deploy these things in more autonomous systems that really do perform work by themselves all the time in the background? I think that by now everybody can see the potential. I think we also have learned quite a lot about how these things will look like. It's not just intelligence in the sense that, a model should produce a good answer. It should produce a good answer that it can test, for example, with code and see what goes wrong, and then adjust, and then try again, just like we do. And these kinds of proven abilities now, they are really, really going to take off during the year, I'm sure.
Yes. And what I think is interesting in addition to that we have a few companies that are doing and really seeing the benefits here.
Yes.
But looking at the statistics, when it comes to large companies, around 75% are using AI in some form. But the smaller the company goes, that percentage actually drops to our smallest, which are only using AI to about like 20% of them.
Yeah.
So that is also a huge gap, and which we find which is why it's so important to talk about agents and to show the real case examples, how it's actually feasible for more and more organization and actually cheaper as well.
Absolutely.
Is there any other trend that didn't make the cut that you would give like an honorable mention, Mauricio?
I mean, as I said, I think the big one for me was also the abilities at coding. Obviously, being a software engineer myself, this is something that I really try to stay on top of as much as I possibly can, of course. I mean, also, I guess one thing to keep in mind is just how relatively cheap things are getting, in the sense that the costs for really top tier intelligence nowadays are really running towards zero. I mean, we have some very clear data that the cost of one of the top tier models from 2020, 24, 2025 dropped by a factor of 10, right? And this is, I think, really shaping how we overall will have to interact with these models, right? And basically how all this is these are becoming commodities in a sense, right? That we have to basically build in, especially if we're thinking about running things at scale, right? And perhaps that also goes to your point of larger companies versus smaller companies in terms of how AI usage differs. But yeah, it's all very interesting trends in terms of how these things are basically dictating how we get to interact with them. It's a very interesting conversation for sure.
And Mauricio, part of your research is also focusing on autonomous driving and the mobility industry in general. And one of our trends this year is embodied AI. So I just wanted to hear, what are you looking forward to in that topic, and what would you like to discuss?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. So obviously a lot of commonalities between embodied AI and the automotive sector. I think the issue of scale is the really big thing. Like, how do you get past the so-called human bottleneck in teaching robots essentially about spatial awareness and what they can do, sort of in a spatial sense? Because if you're always going to rely on humans to basically teach robots to do this, and this is always going to be a very expensive bottleneck for you. So for me, the really interesting approaches are the ones that are at the moment looking at simulation approaches and so-called sim-to-real approaches of basically training as much as you can in simulation and then trying to bring that into the real world and try to basically, as best as possible, manage the so-called generalization gap between these two things. I think that is really sort of dictating the future of the entire area.
Thank you for that comment, and I'm really looking forward to hearing Amy a little bit later talk about this topic. All right, so I think we should be moving on and introduce our first section in the Trend Seminar, and that is our panel concerning de-globalization of AI and geopolitics. And in that panel, I am very proud and happy to welcome three excellent ladies at the forefront of technology and research and autonomous driving in Sweden. And I will let you all give a very quick elevator pitch of yourselves. We're going to start with Irene Ek, who is the Nordic Manager of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google Cloud. Irene, tell us a quick story about yourself.
Yes, I am the policy manager for Google Cloud in the Nordics. I have also been our AI policy lead for Google Cloud in the EU for the past 4 years. So I've been reading all AI Act changes, for example, and I'm also heavily involved into defense and cybersecurity. So I've just finalizing the AI Act consultation response on our behalf. I've read 1,000 pages of the Swedish AI Act implementation. And I'm also our sovereignty responsible for the Nordics, so I'm in all of those discussions as well. So I look forward to talking with my excellent panelists and you today.
Thank you very much, Irene. Let's move over to Ödjard Andersson, who is the CEO of Zensact, which is a Volvo Group company that develops software for the autonomous and assisted driving. Ödjard, give us a short introduction.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, just minor correction. We're a part of the Volvo Cars group, so we focus on the personal cars. And of course, we exist for one reason, and that is really to use the power of modern machine learning and AI to create safety in cars. So our mission is to remove accidents and make sure people are not killed and injured in traffic, which is still a big problem worldwide. And we are probably one of the largest companies in Sweden actually designing our own machine learning and AI solutions. We're about 700 people working on solving automation, and it encompasses everything from taking care of your basic backup systems that make sure you brake automatically if you're about to hit something to full autonomous functions. And thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Although it feels like a bit of a suicide mission to be on a AI trend seminar that's being recorded.
Well, what we say here stands for this date in 2026. Everything can change tomorrow. I think that's the premise of working in an AI in general. So I think hopefully we'll all be excused when this looks very ancient in a year. Last but not least at all, we have Malin Frenning, who is the CEO of Research Institutes of Sweden, aka RISE. Malin, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. So I'm Malin Frenning, the CEO of RISE since 2.5 years. Probably a few of you know that RISE is a key player in the Swedish AI landscape. We have more than 350 AI researchers, and we do high-level AI research at the scale that few others do, which means that we have leading-edge research and innovation on data centers, and for instance, at ICE data center in Luleå. And we have also initiated and coordinated the AI factory, Mimer, in Linköping, together with the university there. That is becoming also more operative than ever. So yeah, a lot of things going on, and it's really nice to be here.
We appreciate you being here a lot as well as Irene and Adyad, of course, as well. So Malin, I actually wanted to start with you and having you kind of frame the problem a little bit. So what does de-globalization of AI mean for Sweden, and what kind of threats are we facing?
Thank you. It's always good to start. De-globalization is a general shift, I think, just to say that. We're moving away from the largely cooperative and the rule-based world order into something more competitive and confrontative. And someone said, or the Prime Minister of Canada said, that we can lament that rupture, but we need to deal with it. And for me, with that as a starting point, the de-globalization of AI has two primary aspects: security and competitiveness. And the first one, security perspective, it is clear that as critical societal functions are rapidly becoming dependent on AI, we cannot accept building in strategic vulnerables where foreign powers effectively can shut down those critical functions. I think that's a starting point for me, at least. And there are many other security reasons for realigning our strategic dependencies, such as data flows and intelligence. But I think this is an obvious one. The second, it seems clear that we have a competitiveness gap in the cloud services, AI, and cybersecurity. And that is a problem in itself. But what is even worse, if I now have the opportunity to frame it, is that this has follow-on effects on the competitiveness of those industries that are currently being transformed by AI. And if we, in Sweden and Europe, want to take a lead on this broader economic and societal transformation, we also need to stop being technology or tech takers and become real tech makers on AI. And that is a large and ambitious goal, which will require a lot of investments and investment also by many parties going forward. So I think that's my starting point for today.
Thank you very much, Malin. And I can't help but to kind of give that ball over to Irene in this conversation, because we're talking a lot about both investments in Europe, which Google, of course, is doing a lot of, but also this question of, Google being an American company, geopolitically, we have shifted quite a lot in relation to the US. So, Irene, what is your take on this? Both as to what investments are currently being made into European sovereignty from your perspective, but also how are you managing this kind of criticism? How can we build trust with an American company? How is Google tackling that?
Yes, and thank you. And sovereignty and security and the new geopolitical agenda, that's very much on our radar as well. And we're having those discussions with all our customers, both in the private sector and in the public sector. And I would like to say that we sincerely recognize and respect the goals of strengthening European digital economy. And we have developed what we call Cloud on Europe's terms. So we're leaning forward into the European demands for sovereignty with our technical solutions. And we're also making a lot of investment into infrastructure. You probably heard about the Cloud and AI Development Act on the European level, where Europe is saying that we need to triple the data center investments in Europe for over 5 years. So just to highlight that we have 7 data centers in Europe that we have invested in, and we have 13 cloud regions. And the last one we launched in Sweden in June last year. So that means that the customers can store data in Sweden. So they can select the Swedish cloud region, and that's also important for our customers to know that. And when it comes to sovereignty, we also have a data boundary. That's what we call it, when the customer can choose where their data is stored and processed. And they can also have what we call external key management. So they can manage their own encryption keys. And they can have what we call key access justification. That means that they own their own key. And then we have a solution called Dedicated. That means that it's a twin copy of our platform that's built and handed over to a local sovereignty partner. And an example of such a partner is Sans in France, for example. And they've just received this Secnon Cloud qualification. That means the highest qualification in Europe that you can actually get. So we have a lot of solutions for customers to make sure that we meet their sovereignty demands, and we want to be a good partner for Europe and for Sweden, so that our AI solution, for example, you can have a ready-made AI model that you can do pretty much plug right into your organization, or you can have building blocks, AI building blocks, where you build it yourself. So we want to be a partner in the AI innovation in Sweden as well. So that's also what we highlighted when we have our Cloud Region launch blog. We had our Swedish partner highlight that it's important for them to have a Swedish AI infrastructure from our side. So just a few notes there. And we just came out, I think it was last week or the week before that, with a new cloud blog also highlighting these sovereignty commitments we do in case we should get asked by a nation to suspend our services in a certain country. So we have also made very clear commitments on that externally so that all our customers can read and feel very, very comfortable. So, but we take these discussions very, very seriously. And I think that I agree with the Swedish Prime Minister, and he actually pushed back a little bit on European preference, saying that that doesn't always suit small export-dependent countries such as Sweden. We have also heard such voices from Finland, and maybe we should think about made with Europe instead, and also highlighting Mr. Slottner. In November, he was at the Sovereignty Summit in Europe, and he also highlighted that open sovereignty's approach is what the Swedish government believe is most beneficial for Sweden. And I think so as well. So we just need to be good partners, all of us.
Thank you, Irene. And we're going to get back into sort of what should the strategy for Sweden and Europe be in a minute. But first, I wanted to ask you, Adyad, as the CEO of a company that's headquartered in Sweden, but we know with a global market, what geopolitical considerations are you navigating at the moment?
Well, I mean, we come from a world that very much used to be that one global product serves all markets globally. It may be developed in Asia or US or Europe, but a Volvo car was the same whether it was in Sweden or US or China. And then I think we've gradually seen this more regionalized trend going on. Of course, there have always been some local preferences, like you like larger cars in the US or sportier cars in Europe and things like that. A number of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we saw that like the digital ecosystems in general in China started differing from the ones that were in US and Europe, seeing more cloud providers being native in China, but also like infotainment systems going more Chinese. And that trend is just basically, I think, accelerating now. So everything from SoCs to like sensing technologies to, of course, AI and software applications are now really growing into different solutions in China versus US. And then Europe is a little bit playing in both fields here. And I think it's a little bit remains to be decided how that plays out. I think also that in turn has led to, since the whole digital ecosystem in China is different from the one in the West, the preferences of the consumer are growing different as well. So we're basically getting different products. On top of that, we see quite a lot of regulation happening on data. And since more and more of our products are now made by machine learning, they become the data that we train them on. So when Chinese data has to stay in China, an accident that happens in China, we cannot pull that data out and learn from that in Sweden, or vice versa from Sweden or from the US. I think there are some opportunities here where we can bridge some of those gaps, because we obviously don't ever want a child in Sweden to die because we couldn't pull data out of another country and learn from that. We are now seeing, I think, some advances in synthetic data that can somewhat cover for this gap. But overall, we're seeing much, much more regionalized products, especially in the digital space. That doesn't mean that every single nut and bolt that's kind of non-sensitive type of equipment will be local or regional, but we will for sure see more regionalization.
Danielle, do you recognize yourself in this? I mean, you're also in a global company,
Yes.
but that doesn't deal with hardware, with cars in the same way,
we're
but software.
completely software based. Yeah, absolutely. No, we see that, and as Odette says, it typically usually comes down to data. Where can data live? What can we do to refine data, and where do we actually use that in product and things like that? So it very much comes down to that. It's a challenge. I think that also part of the regulatory part is a little bit challenging, because right now we're also diverging a little bit on which rule sets are where, and that becomes tricky, especially if you need to apply all of these rules, the least common denominator basically, to all of our products. And that is a little bit of a challenge, especially operating, for example, in the cybersecurity space, dealing with some relatively sensitive things and relatively particular processes in different countries. So I think this is a profound effect on the software industry. Yeah.
So do you think we're going to be seeing products that are regionally different? Perhaps the safety is the same, as you said, we don't want to have any injuries of children because of data, but will we have different kind of products because of the data restriction in different countries? And what will that entail? Is that entirely bad, or could it be good? I guess I'm directing it at Odette.
Yeah. I think that is already happening, and it has already happened to some degree, and it's continuing. I think overall, having a global product means that every R&D crown or dollar or whatever currency we choose that we spend can be split on all the products we deliver globally. That means the cost for the consumer is less. So I think mostly this is not a good trend. However, we live in the world we live. I think the potential positive side is that it's more possible than to tailor towards the local preferences that might be different in different areas. So there's a small upside, but I think mostly it's not great.
Thank you. So I want to get into the question of European sovereignty. And I mean, we do feel a lot of pressure both in Sweden and in Europe to become more autonomous when it comes to tech. But can we actually become self-sufficient at tech? What should a realistic ambition be for Europe, maybe mainly Sweden? Malin, would you start with that question, please?
Thank you. I believe that Sweden can certainly not be self-sufficient on AI, just to start there, or basically any other technology. Innovation is a team sport. That is why it's so fun to be in RISE, of course. And I believe that we have put too many eggs into one basket, and we need to start diversifying that. And that is not anti-American, it's prudential. And the Nordic countries are an obvious first choice of partners, where we have more things in common than that separate us. And the European Union is another, where we share a lot of values and ideas, not to mention legislation, single market, and a pretty powerful set of research and innovation policies. But beyond this, I think we also have to become a lot smarter and more cooperative with other and together with other countries such as UK, Canada, South Korea, and Japan, just to name a few. And again, I think we need to be this tech maker and do that together. So I think I stop there.
Thank you. I'm going to direct the same question to the others. What do we need to do? What can we do? What is the ambition we should strive for? Irene.
Yeah, we have developed, as I started to mention, our Serenity solutions. So to meet the European demands. So we had the data boundary, we had the Google Cloud Dedicated with European partners, and then we also have air-gapped solutions. So that's fully standalone solutions that does not require connection to our external networks. We have a few such examples with the Ministry of Defense in the UK and the Ministry of Defense in Germany. So, and that's also an interesting solution, but that's more for defense actors or intelligence actors. So every organization have to also start thinking about their own sovereignty needs and what type of data they have and which sovereignty solutions that fits their organizations. And I agree with Daniel that the regulatory landscape is not always easy. So we have actually held knowledge sessions here in the Stockholm office for all our customers across the Nordics on sovereignty and AI compliance. So, and that was really something that was super interesting for our customers to come and join. And we had all our internal experts, and you can ask them questions. So we had legal, we had our Northern Europe cybersecurity expert, and me, and and joining forces in doing that, doing it together. So, and I've also been very vocal in launching AI app blogs for our customers to help guide on compliance in all of this, because that's not easy. And now we also have the cybersecurity law for Sweden, the Swedish NIS2 implementation, and that went a little bit above the European NIS2. So there's a lot of regulation coming there. So we need to join forces and do our best to guide companies and public sector organization and doing that together. So I think that that's very important, and we try to be a good partner there as possible. So, and we just had the Munich cybersecurity conference, so we had a lot of engagement there, and we released a new blog on quantum cryptography, which I think is really interesting. So, and we also had an AI in defense and security paper that we launched. And we also have the Google Threat Insight, that's the old Mandiant, they're world leading. So they also have Threat Insight that they share online. So all organizations can learn from the biggest threat that are visible now to us and how we can meet them with great security. And that's what we call security by default. So we build security into the products already from the beginning, so that because sometimes it's difficult to procure secure solutions. So that's a good idea to build it into the product from the beginning.
Thank you very much, Irene. I'm going to continue on the same track. Dad, what do you think an ambition for you could be? What could we actually do in terms of being sovereign when it comes to AI and tech?
I mean, first of all, I think it's not a possibility to go fully sovereign. Definitely not from a Swedish perspective, also not from a European perspective. But I think we could actually apply a little bit of engineering thinking on this, because when we design safety critical systems or somehow critical systems, we always think about this is the sunshine route. This is what we want the system to do. Let's build it with the best possible components to achieve that. And then we, on top of that, think about what if something goes wrong, and then we design redundancy mechanisms. And I think we need to take the same approach to this. We cannot put all the eggs in one basket, as somebody said. I mean, we cannot fully rely on one player or one country, or, I mean, since the world is now becoming this complicated, we need to make sure that if this falls out, we don't sit here with nothing. We have to have some redundancy mechanisms. And I think that will entail that we need to build some capabilities in Europe that we traditionally have not had. That doesn't mean we won't work with American cloud providers or whatever. We will continue to work. And that would also mean if we stopped working with everybody, that we would miss out on the joint innovation and the learning from each other. But I think we do need to grow some capabilities in some areas where we are too dependent on single points of failure.
Yes. Did you have a comment, Daniel?
No, I fully agree. I do think, though, that it's not all doom and gloom. And of course, American companies, for example, are taking initiatives to make sure that we can operate sovereignly in Europe, etc., etc., etc. But I think that we have gotten a bit of a wake-up call in terms of ambition. And it's, should we own the complete stack from AI applications to AI models with Frontier Labs to AI chip accelerator design down all the way to ASML and things like that? Maybe not, but I do think we need a larger ambition in all of these levels, basically, because innovation in one feeds innovation in the next, feeds innovation in the next one. So to actually create this kind of ecosystem, I think we need to be way more ambitious in Europe and actually try to build things all over the stack. It will make us much better partners. We said here earlier that innovation is a team sport, and it's better to become better team players, basically.
For sure. And then that makes me
I
think
don't
like,
think this is doom and gloom at all. I think this is a super opportunity, especially for Sweden.
Exactly.
I think we actually have some capabilities in many of these areas, all the way from application to kind of building embedded systems like embodied AI.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, this is the time to accelerate.
Yes.
what do you think our strengths in Sweden are, Malin, as with the helicopter perspective you have from your position?
I think I will also continue on what you just said, Daniel, because I think it's crucial to have a larger ambition. And if we should become this tech maker, there are a lot of things that needs to be done. And I think one of the crucial things, I've been more than 20 plus years in the digital industry before I came to RISE. And I think to start with the infrastructure. And Sweden and Europe will need serious investments into the data centers and computing capacity to be able to build our own models for our own data and the own application needs. And this is also, I mentioned Mimer, the AI factory that has been initiated. And that is also the next step for us is to be part of the planning to form a consortia to apply for the European AI gigafactories. I think that is crucial moving onwards. And if we can have that in Sweden, open and accessible for the industry and built on renewable and safe energy, that would be an important start. And I think that's what I mean with the infra. And the second is also to continue on what you said earlier, Daniel, is a European tech stack. I think that is the second part that is needed in the ambition, because we need to establish a technology stack that covers everything from the cloud to AI to cybersecurity services, and which can be operated and controlled without some interference of foreign, whatever we mean with that tech. So I think that's I think two things that are crucial for the how and how we can achieve this ambition. And I think that we have a pretty good starting point here to do this, but we have to do it together.
What will it take to get those investments? Because they are pretty substantial from what it sounds like. Like, for instance, decision makers and politicians, are they on board? Or what else can we do to ensure we get the financing that is needed behind these efforts? I'm directing it to you, Malin.
Yeah, I understand that. I think, again, we need to understand what happens if we don't do it. And just go back a couple of years, I was in the late 90s, I was responsible for the submarine cables in a telecom operator here in Sweden, and nobody understood why we should invest in that part. And I think it's the same here. We need to be able to more or less tell what happens if we don't have the ability to do these calculations and for the industry. And I think for me, it's about competitiveness and to strengthen that. And of course, to be able to invest in that, because yes, it's costly. We need to do that together in Europe, together with the politicians and the industry, and understand and have the same pictures ahead. What do we need to create for us being competitive in 20 years ahead? Because it's us here that have the responsibility to create the fundament for the existing companies and for the companies that don't exist yet. And I think that's a really good thing to think about when we go to work. So we need to do it together.
Thank you, Malin. We have a few seconds left to this panel, so I just want to give a last word to the one that it's representing the Swedish industry, Erdjad, what do you think is the most important European investment we can do at the moment? What would you like to see if you could dream anything realized tomorrow?
I think we need to put significantly more effort into designing our own SoCs and producing them.
That was a very fast and precise answer. I couldn't dreamt of a better one. Thank you very much. With that being said, I want to thank all of you panelists. It's been a very interesting discussion. I think we could have been continuing for quite a while, but we do have so much more in this trend seminar and we need to move on. So thank you very much for your thoughtful inputs.
Thank you.
All right. So time has come for us to switch topics now. It's, as you can see, we're going to be talking about embodied intelligence and physical AI. A great segue, I think, from having talked to especially Erdjad. So I would like to introduce Amy Lutfi, who is a professor at both Örebro University and Linköping University, as well as the program director at WASP. So Amy, we're going to be talking about embodied AI. It's a media favorite. We've all seen clips of humanoid robots the last year or two. But of course, there's so much more than robots doing kickflips or whatever to embodied AI. So what is actually going on? Please let us know.
Oh, well, I will do my best. There is a lot happening in the field, of course, and I think something that Daniel said, which really resonates, is it's hard to really distinguish between what is new and what is getting a revival. And I would actually argue that the field of embodied AI, physical AI, is getting a bit of a revival. It is certainly nothing new, but there are some important developments that are worth lifting, that have the potential to transform this area even further. So I've been asked to give sort of a short presentation for frame the area of embodied AI. And let me do that. And before I do, I just want to say a few things about who I am and what I do. I've been working research-wise in the area now since 1999, in fact, and time has gone by very quickly. And I've done research in the field of AI and robotics since that time. Also, something that I just want to mention is that I am program director for an initiative called WASP, which is the Wallenberg AI Autonomous Systems and Software program. And I just want to say very few words about WASP before I go into this kind of trends analysis on physical and embodied AI. And just very quickly about WASP, it is involving a number of universities and groups across Sweden. You see their logos here. It is an initiative that really aims on creating excellent research and doing, I think, competence injection for Sweden in not only AI, but also autonomous systems and software for the benefit of both Swedish society and industry. And the initiative is funded by the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation. It started in 2015 and it will go until 2034. So 20 years. And we are at the halfway mark and full throttle in the program. The goal was to graduate 600 PhD students. We're projecting 700. And the goal is 80 new research groups in Sweden, and we have achieved that goal. Just a few numbers. We are producing on average more than one PhD a week, and this alumni is a fantastic competence injection for Sweden. But in total, if we count today, we're over 1,200 researchers in the community, and it is really a vibrant community. And not only do we work in terms of how do we promote and encourage and develop these academic environments, but also, as I mentioned, for the benefit of Swedish industry and society. And we do that in something called research arenas. And in fact, these research arenas also encapsulate much of these trends that we're talking about. We have an arena about media and language, an arena on robotics, an arena on medicine, public safety, as well as looking at operational data and anomaly detection. So it's a very sort of vibrant and bubbling group. And of course, one is welcome to take a look at the webpage to find more information about it. But today, what I want to do is I want to go more to my own research. and not present actually only my research, but see, what are the kind of hot topics within the field of embodied and physical AI, and very quickly sort of bring them up, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions and discussion. So first of all, we need to break down or unpack what we mean by this term. And I have to say that the term embodied AI is not only confined to the physical world, but when we talk about embodied and physical AI, we are assuming that we are operating through and in the physical world. And intelligence in itself is kind of inherently integrated and emerging through that interaction in the physical world and through embodiment. And I'm going to also nuance a bit more between physical AI and embodied AI. A core feature here is that you have perception, so the ability to sense your environment, tightly integrated with action, the ability to affect and change the environment. This is what we humans supposedly should be very good at, right? And our ability to do that is shaped by, in part, our bodies, that is to say, our embodiment. And that in turn also is somehow affected by the environments in which we operate. And in addition to this, interaction becomes very important. So this is not your task of only doing prediction, but actually interaction becomes a very important learning signal. It's either interaction in the environment, but as I will present a little bit later, it's also interaction between these physical agents that are either artificial or biological, like other humans. Now, there are different ways that the term embodied AI gets presented and lifted. Here's one particular example from Qualcomm that I think captures a lot of the important ingredients in embodied AI. But keep in mind that embodied AI is not necessarily confined to the physical world. In fact, physical AI is in some ways a subset of embodied AI, and embodied AI is very much a subset of physical AI. But when you put these two together, you get some very interesting things. You get, first of all, different forms of embodiments. So they can be anything from humanoids to manipulators to wheeled robots to autonomous vehicles to telepresence robots. You have a lot of different types of shapes and sizes of these physical devices. When we talk about embodied AI and embodied and physical AI, we often refer to, as I mentioned, tight perception and action loops. So we are not necessarily referring to systems like a fixed camera mounted on a wall. However, these types of systems certainly encompass the umbrella of physical AI. So the terminology is something that is in flux. It is something that is moving. And the reason why I'm kind of harping on about it is simply because, as we're saying, is it a trend or is it not a trend? Well, you can find a lot of this terminology going far back. And you can find these terms popping up in different fields, from automation, robotics, but also cognitive robotics and cognition. So it's important to kind of keep a trace of how this trend has been developing over time. But nevertheless, I would say the advent and the development, certainly of large language models, of large-scale AI, has been pushing this field forward. Now, I also wanted to give a reflection as to why we are kind of reviving it again, and why isn't all of this already solved? In other words, what makes physical and embodied AI hard? And the short answer, I believe, is that the physical world is a very, very complex place. And the real world provides a lot of very complex dynamics. There are many things that are uncertain, and we still have a difficult time quantifying that uncertainty. And there are a lot of things that happen that require us to kind of break down and understand the world. I put a few images on my slide, everything from, how does one handle an object like a coffee cup, where you know that if you touch the actual cup with a hot cup of coffee, it's going to be very hot, but the handle itself makes it much more graspable. And that you can look at this image and figure out that probably the coffee is hot, whereas there could be another type of liquid there that you would infer as cool. You can consider objects that have things like permanence, or objects whose properties can change, but they still kind of remain the same. You can cut, for example, a carrot, and it still functions as a carrot. You can break a glass, it no longer affords the ability to contain. And I just sort of, for amusement, put an image of Peter Pan, because objects in our physical world have interactions with each other. Peter Pan was known for mistaking his shadow as being another agent. And this is actually something that can be quite difficult for robots to also distinguish. And not least, interaction between humans and also between agents is very important. And how do we cope with this is also very important. So there are a lot of challenges here, and as soon as we start going into the physical world and we start having physical interaction, we should not also forget the importance of these machines being safe, being robust, and not harming us. And this is what makes the area of physical and embodied AI such a complex one, and certainly one worth study. And what are the trends within this area that we are starting to see? Well, one of them is that we are seeing more and more effort in the area of creating foundation models for physical AI. These foundation models, these large-scale models, are integrating data from various sources and are actually able to do things like put together vision, language, but also action for assisting in things like robotic control. You may have heard the term VLAs. They are often trained on massive data sets. And in fact, there is more and more research being put in the area of how can we use, for example, spatial data, 3D data, and train a foundation model in the same way we use text to train these large language models. And the idea is that they should be able to support the physical world and inferring what happens in the physical world. So if I say things like pick up the cup, we would be able to understand what would be the consequence of that and what would be sometimes even the causal relations of that. And we are hearing from many of the AI experts out there this notion of world models, which basically means that we learn to simulate how the environment evolves and how actions will actually impact future states. Another trend that sometimes humans, of course, are bottlenecks because humans have to train these AIs, but we also have to keep in mind that in safety critical applications, we maybe want a human in the loop, and we would ideally want to bring the human in the loop when necessary, but also perhaps put the human aside if the human's performance isn't ideal. So human in the loop learning and how to bring interaction and AI into this kind of physical context is also a main trend. And also how to achieve what is now becoming more and more at focus, which is the human and AI teaming. And this could be done, for example, in a semi-teleoperated type of system, which I showed you in the video here, where you have a human coming in only at certain points, and there's some AI that is detecting when the human needs to enter. But also, as I'm showing you on the right, you may have systems that are, for example, combining real data, in this case, real satellite data, with virtual information. So we can, in this image here, take satellite information. We could flood a city, and then we bring in that physical agent. Like imagine you have a drone that is supposed to navigate into that city and use a combination of the real data, the virtual data, And in this particular case, you're seeing a path that is being planned by the drone to navigate in a city that has a lot of water and avoid, for example, water. So what I want to say here is that we're having these systems that are highly interactive, that can bring the human into the loop when needed, and can also leverage from virtual and real data in order to plan action. Another important trend within this field is, of course, multimodal perception, because the physical agent, like the robot, is a fantastic transporter of sensors. And that means that if we can endow these robots with a very rich suite of sensor technology, we can actually leverage upon their mobility, upon their ability, and the fact that they can go to places we never can imagine, like Mars, in order to get a richer view of our physical environment. And multimodal perception is more than just simply having a number of sensors. It's about really how do you integrate that information together, again, in a coherent model. And how do you give that information meaning? And that could actually be as well as giving that information what we call semantic meaning. So if you're navigating in an environment, you know that that particular room that you have entered is not just a room, but it is an office. And that means something. Also, what we're discovering in the field of embodied AI is that the physical processes and the cognitive processes that are coming from the interpretation of sensor results are tightly integrated. And I can give a very clear example of how this works in humans. And this is an example that I've used sometimes. If you look at the image here on the screen, it's an image of a lemon. And if I would kind of start telling a story about this lemon, about how you would cut it up and that it was very juicy, and you picked up the lemon and you took a big bite into the lemon and you could feel the bitterness of the lemon and all of those juices enter and stimulate your taste buds, you would actually, in some cases, for some people, start to actually feel a physical reaction, which basically means that language in itself is actually stimulating a physical reaction. And that is kind of because in humans, those two processes, our physical and our cognitive processes, are tightly intertwined. And the idea of embodied AI is really to examine how do we get that same level of connection of the physical robot with its environment. Now, we talked about, or we mentioned sim to real. So there is an enormous challenge when you're working with all of the challenges with robotics and physical AI, to be able to, for example, expose them to enough training data. There's also the challenge, and we heard this before, of exposing them to what we would call rare events. So maybe we don't need to leverage off of the fact that there was a car accident and use that data, but maybe we could simulate an accident, variations of accidents, all of these particular cases that we prefer not to actually have in the real world in order to train our systems. And to do that, we can leverage upon simulation. Now, to really get good simulation, we also have to get good physics models and get them integrated into these simulations. But there is an enormous capability now to do much more in these simulated environments. And then once done in simulation, bring them onto real platforms. I'm just showing you some videos here that are coming.
Amy, we're going to need you to round it up quite quickly, just a reminder.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm just showing you a few videos here that are showing what's happening in simulation and then how you can bring that in. Then I just want to say there's an interesting duality between how we use AI on embodied systems, but how embodied systems can push AI. For example, can we leverage the notion of play to make robots self-discover how to work in the world? And not least, can we leverage the notion of interaction in order to get these embodied agents to work better in the real world? So social and interactive agents. So there is a lot happening. everything from dexterous manipulation to looking at the generalized robot. I put this up, and I'm going to end here by saying one thing, which is when you're seeing these systems, from my personal point of view, they are very impressive and also sometimes a little bit disappointing. Disappointing from the sense that I still think we're missing those really good applications of embodied agents. And I really look forward to seeing how these trends can lead to embodied agents that really do something useful for humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amy, for that introduction to embodied AI. And this, of course, raises so many questions for us. I want to give the word to Daniel to ask the first question.
Sure. So this is a very general question, I guess, but we've seen really, really rapid development of AI in the last few years. It's becoming really, really useful, but we still do have some issues with robustness and groundedness in reality and things like that. So I'm just curious about your take, Amy, basically. This tight connection between perception and action, that we have multimodal input and things like that. Is that a necessity for real, true, general, and robust intelligence that can truly reason about the world?
So there are two factions in the field. Some people believe that you will never achieve true intelligence without embodiment, and some think that you can have true intelligence without it. I think I personally belong to the former more than the latter. I do think I think being embodied in the physical world in particular is what drives intelligence. It is kind of what allows you to have an intelligence that is self-propelling, simply because you can actively discover, you can actively manipulate, and it is in that process that you drive your learning. But I think it's something worth debate. Nevertheless, we need much, much more research in order to reach robustness. This is something that we're getting better at, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
So looking at the year ahead, apart from hype videos with robots doing cool stuff, although being remote controlled, what actual breakthroughs do you think we're going to see in embodied AI?
So I think we're going to see foundation models with richer data, like 3D spatial data, that we can then start to use onto these physical platforms. I also think we're going to see much more physics-informed neural networks. So we're kind of combining what we know in equations with what we gather from data. And I think that's also going to lead to a lot, not just for embodied AI, but in AI for science, for example. So I mean, it's only in 1 year from now. So I see maybe those two things as coming much, much further.
Do we have enough data for these real world models? I mean, for LLMs, you had this huge amount of data on the internet, right? But do we actually have enough like real world interaction data, or do we need to produce more?
Yeah. So we need to produce more representative data. So it's both in terms of volume and quality and also distribution.
All right. Very concise. Thank you. I'm also curious, Ödjard and Malin were into this kind of view that we have a great position in Sweden, not least when it comes to embodied AI. Would you concur with that? Or like, are we equipped and should we get into the embodied AI race in Sweden?
So I would say Sweden is very much in it, in the race. I think we have all the conditions to continue to be in the race and be a strong player. Because a lot of the AI that you see in Sweden is physical AI. And I think in particular, Sweden's very long history, as well as being a strong control theory nation, gives it a very good position to be strong in the area of physical and embodied AI.
What is needed for us to not only be in the race, but excel in it?
Oh, that's a very good question. So again, I can only give like a personal opinion. I think it's just simply about not being too hesitant and too afraid. There are a lot of unknowns, and in particular, regulation is one issue that we need to kind of sort out to see, well, how far can we push the technology? But I think if we're bold, we can really take a very strong standing internationally. And I mean, if I think about the number of global companies that are emerging from Sweden, Sweden is in a very good position to be strong in this area.
Thank you, Amy, and good luck in your future endeavors and research. All right, it's time for us to move on to the third and last trend of this seminar. And last year we did talk about agents as a coming trend, or something we saw. This is going to come and it's going to be big. And as we talked about before, we are seeing these real world results of it. And that's why we wanted to do this follow-up and look at someone who's actually working on it in real life. And that is why I would like to welcome Aron Lagerberg, who is the principal AI scientist at Recorded Future, and he is here in the flesh. Yes. So very welcome to you, Aron.
Thank you, thank you.
So we're just going to let you take it away and have a little presentation, and then me and Daniel are going to come back for questions after. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super happy to be here. And in my day-to-day work, I work with building agents to actually deliver on real-world goals. And I'm here today to talk a bit about what I think are the main principles we have to adhere to achieve that. And I should start to preface this by saying that models and agents here to me are mostly text-to-text things. So not the embodied sense, but more you get text in and you get text out. So when I say models, I mean large language models, mostly. So future-proof agents, governance as architecture. So I think as we have alluded to here in the studio today, like the new normal is that the trend is going so quickly upwards these days. AI capabilities leap forward every 3 months and even shorter time horizons now. And I'm not talking about small increments. I'm talking about big leaps in terms of the capabilities of these models. And that actually poses both, of course, enormous opportunity for us in the field who actually are trying to use these to build real systems. But they also come with some risks that we have to mitigate. And I think the biggest risk is that you build for the models you have today. And you build around the flaws of the models that you have currently at your disposal. And this means that you are at risk, basically. When new models arrive, you need to be able to make sure that you can take advantage of the new power that comes with them. So the goal is really to future-proof for the models that will come. And like when a new model drops now every 3 months, you want to be able to harness that power. And I want to take you through a few points that I think are key to succeed in that. So, first of all, like when you create this system, they reason in text and you have to give them instructions in some shape or form. And I think it's very important that you distinguish in terms of what type of instructions you give them. And I like to frame this as logic versus knowledge. Some parts of how you instruct them are usually in terms of logic. Things like you want it to perform something that actually does not belong in text. It should actually be in terms of the code or the architecture itself. This is something that you need to be able to assure that this will happen. So for instance, here you have to output the text in a specific form, or first do this and then that. This is something that you have to actually encode into process, not language. But on the other hand, you have domain prompting, which is really where the knowledge and of the actual domain that you're in, and that is where that part belongs. So for instance, you need to define what the risk is to you, what a cyber attack is for you. I'm in the threat industry, so that's very close to my heart. Or like, what is the SOP for gathering intelligence for a port, for instance? And this is knowledge. This belongs in context. And I think, like building a lot of this system, we see a lot of a mix here, and I think it's very important that you separate those out, because the logic in prompts is really something that it's basically tech depth. It's something you have to change every 3 months nowadays. But the domain knowledge in context, that is really your asset. And these, both of these compound, the first one in a negative way, but the domain knowledge more in a positive way for your business, hopefully. So the second point, I think it's extremely important that you understand what the model's primitives or the basic building blocks that the models have are, and that you try to optimize for these native capabilities. Also, I think you should really hone your intuition on trying to figure out what are these natives and what will they be in 3 to 4 months, so that you don't try to invent too much yourself here, but rather rely on what you think will come in the future. And I like the term, like, you should try to use these platforms, not fight them. So I think an example of this is, like, last year you might have needed 500 lines of code and prompting to search through files, but now that's just consumed in the models themselves. It's more or less an innate capability. And of course, the great win here is that if you think like this, as soon as the models improves on these primitives, like getting better at using tools, using files and skills, etc., your agent will sort of upgrade for free. And that is a very nice place to be in. Thirdly, I think this is one of the most fundamental building blocks, and to a large extent, the great success of today's models and agentic systems. And this is what I refer to as the closed loop. So instead of trying to instruct these models of going in chains, we now instruct them to go in loops. And it's basically this action, verification, and correction type loop. So you can imagine that the agent might call some tool, but maybe you don't get exactly what you want, or you maybe even get an error or something like that. But the models themselves can see, well, it's an error here, I need to correct this. So instead of just moving forward, it will actually try to loop and correct itself. And why I think this is super important is because this really makes these systems resilient to a degree which was very hard when you didn't have these mechanisms in place. And this is also one of these primitives that I think that the big model providers are really training their models on. So they will just get better and better at this. And the interesting thing here is really that weaker models, it will use this loop in maybe slightly worse way, but when a stronger model comes along, it will just do the same thing, but better. So that's what I mean by the resilience part. And the code will remain exactly the same either way. So a truly resilient architecture. And lastly here, I think, at least conceptually, I think it's very important that you try to decouple the brain and the body. The brain is what is commoditized already, and this is not where you should be spending your time. You should be spending the time in the body part, where you build out your tools, you build out your schemas and skills, you build out your governance rules, and this is what you own. The brain is just what you buy. And you should really try to make sure that when a new model is released, you can really just remove the brain, put in the new one, but the body stays. And of course, I realize that this sounds very simple, but there is some friction in between here. But I think it's very important to just call out what that part is and try to model that. So I like maybe to put something in between here, which I refer to as the skeleton. So we have the brain, that you should not build that. That's the LLM, the commodity. You have the muscle down there, that's your domain logic, and basically your competitive moat. This is what you build and what makes you you. But in between there you have the skeleton, which is sort of what sits between the model and your application. This can be things like skills, tools, variable passing, and the mechanisms by which you use those. And I think just by calling out that there is something in here, really enables you to be very careful with how you invest your time and really try to tease out which parts here do I think will be absorbed by the models like in 2 months. Maybe you should not invest so much then in that part. But we will see a bit later what I think we should invest in. And that is actually governance. And to me, governance is the next part of actually building real world agentic systems that actually work. And one way to define it is this, the boundary between what the agent can do and what it may do. And I think now it's you see a lot of great examples and demos of agents doing very cool things. But I think this is what will get us from like 90% reliability, which is basically just a toy or a demo, to something with 99% reliability and something we can trust and actually deploy across enterprises. So conceptually, I like to break it down as 3 levels of agent governance. So the first level is the sort of naive level, the place where we were stuck for quite some time at the beginning of LLMs. And it's basically just suggesting via language. So you could say things like, please be accurate, please don't make things up. But this is very weak. There is nothing that enforces that this actually happens. You just give that to the models and hope that they will adhere. Level 2 is enforcing some sort of output by enforcing structure on the output. So you could say, well, you have to output age and address, for instance, and the models now actually have built into them that you can say you have to do this, and they will have to adhere to that. They don't have a they can't really not adhere to that. So this makes it deterministic. You will get something which is age. You will get something which is an address in that case. But the thing is, it's still just text, and the model can still make that text up. So now you have sort of enforced some structure, but you don't have enforced sort of the content of what's in that structure. So that brings us to level 3, probably the most important of these levels, enforcing using lineage. So instead of just outputting text, you enforce the models to also output something like an artifact ID, which you can actually go back and verify what does that mean? Like, where did this come from? It's not just text that the model invents, it's something that you can see, okay, this came from like Eniro or something like that. And let me dig into level 3 a bit more. So as I said, the problem is that even though we enforce structure, the agents can still hallucinate the content. But using this lineage protocol, instead of inventing content, the agents will hold just a reference. So it can go something like this. So the tool saves, when the agent calls a tool, it will save the output to that to some data store, and you will just get back the reference ID to that data. And the agent sees this and reasons on the data and decides on the next step. And when moving to the next step, it has to produce both data, but also pass in the reference ID that backs that data up. And this makes it so that you can actually verify that the content is correct. And to some extent, it makes it impossible for these agents to act on hallucinated content, which is critical for real-world success. This leads us, using this protocol, we can actually encode governance as code, not just by saying this is what you should do, but actually enforcing it in the code as it should be. Because you shouldn't leave this up to the agents to maybe do this or maybe not. These are things that you actually have to do. So for instance, here in text, you might say you cannot enter the verdict phase without 2 artifact IDs. Well, here you can actually enforce that by, well, if artifacts collected less than 2, then can verdict no. And even more, if you have those artifacts, you can also make sure that, well, where did these artifacts come from and what's in them, and do they actually support this next step? So you can be even stricter there. And the result of this is that shortcuts for these agents are structurally impossible. Like the gates won't open until you do what you have to do. And that is very powerful as a concept, that you get your models to this state. So why does this matter? Well, for instance, like in cybersecurity, say that you see that your agent has blocked some IP 1234 here. So instead of just having a chat log saying, well, we did this, we did that, we have blocked this IP, we'll get a pointer to the evidence of what data supported the blocking of that. So in this case, you might have some ID, and when you sort of click that, you see the actual data backing that blockage. So when someone asks, why did we actually block this? You can actually show them the lineage going back and what went into that decision, and not just an AI summary. And I'm sure that if you use agents like Claude today, you see them taking these shortcuts all the time. And this is a way of really blocking them from being able to do that. So to conclude, like for me, 90% reliability, it's really, really impressive, but it's still not something that you can deploy on a large scale. You have to get above the 99% reliability to get into the enterprise space. And I hope that I have somehow convinced you a bit today that to cross this gap, a few key things are needed. And I think this closed loop is really a key thing. This makes your agents very resilient. That is one of the basic pillars, of course. Governance for safety, like you have to enforce that using code, not just by suggesting it. And lineage protocol for verifiability. Even though you might structurally enforce things, you have to also be able to go back and say exactly which data points supported this action or this decision. So from this perspective, I really feel that reliability is the feature, and that is what we need to, in some sense, solve for these agentic systems to be truly, truly useful. So to finish up, like the models get better all the time. I think every 2 months now we have seen big increments in terms of what these models can do. And for us that builds agentic systems on top of these, I think these are the things you should adhere to. You should embrace native primitives. You should decouple the brain and the body. You should be investing in the muscle and not the skeleton, and be really vigilant of what belongs where in that. And most importantly, you should govern very deeply. You should put up the structure, the determinism, and the lineage to support a true governance structure. And with that, you build agentic systems that scale with tomorrow's models. And that's what we're here to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Aron, for that presentation. So we're going to keep you here for just a few minutes because we obviously have questions to ask for you. And I wanted to start with, well, I understand you might not be allowed to talk extensively about what you're doing at Recorded Future, but I wanted to ask, like, how are you using these methods today, and how far have you come with your agent systems?
Yeah, we are in the business of deploying this on a large scale. So as I said, like 99% reliability and above, that is really needed for not to have thousands of agents doing the wrong thing. So yeah, let's leave it at that.
I hear you. I am also curious about this analogy you had about the brain, the skeleton, and the muscles. I want to understand the skeleton a bit better. So both, like, could you give some more examples of what that could be composed of, and what do you think is like the next obvious thing that the models are gonna adopt?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I think, as I mentioned a bit, part of this, the structural component, that now models can actually, you can force them to output in a certain structure. That was actually something that we previously had to build in the skeleton itself. So I have lots of code backdated that does exactly this. like enforcing that you get the proper structure. If you don't get it, send it back to the LLM to try again. Now that's entirely gobbled up into the models themselves. You can tell them you have to follow this structure, and they are not allowed to do anything else. So that's one of those things that really was part of the skeleton, but now has moved into the models themselves. A simple example, but I think tools, skills, all of that is also a perfect example that this sits right now, I feel, in the skeleton layer. I think a lot of that will be totally absorbed by the models themselves.
Daniel, what thoughts did Aaron's keynote evoke to you?
No, I think it's a very, very good point. The fact that we're seeing really, really strong demonstrations right now of really, truly agentic and long-lived systems. But we're in the business, a lot of us, we and a lot of people listening to this seminar, I'm sure, of actually deploying this in risky situations, in scenarios where it cannot go wrong very many times, etc., etc. So the timeline, basically, when do we start seeing these things really deployed at scale in practice? But I would argue that we're not seeing that yet.
No, I agree. I think the coding agents are the closest thing we see to be live in production.
Yeah.
But they have such a very nice environment to act in. Like they have code, it's like the best things for agent to write. You have tests, you can verify things. In the real world, it's not that simple.
Exactly. Don't have very many time limits as well, basically. You don't need to react in a certain time, etc.
Yeah. So I think it's a guessing game, but like so much effort is poured into this right now, like billions and billions of dollars.
Yes.
So I think we will see quite quickly it converging into something that is really deployed on a massive scale. Yeah. But I do believe like the governance layer is really not there in terms of these general type models right now. And I think that is the next step that we need to figure out.
Yeah.
For sure. And in addition, now we talked about, single agent governance. But what do you think happens when we have full systems with multiple agents? What complexities does that entail for the governance?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's I would say it's exponential in scope. But you have to start with the single agents. Like, I think it will be very hard to move into this multi-agent space without nailing that first. But on the other hand, I feel that maybe the mechanisms are not that different between the single one and the multi-agent scenario, just on a larger scale and harder to actually contain.
And isn't that a little bit of the lesson from the last few years as well, basically, that we can speculate on what comes ahead, but often that's not entirely useful because we need to build stuff and let the rest of the world catch up and build stuff and sort of converge to what the solutions look like to be able to take the next step, right?
No, it's really like we're flying in a spaceship, building it at the same time.
Exactly.
It's like it's
and we're tons of people doing that.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So what are your kind of predictions for the coming year? What do you think, what breakthroughs do you think we're going to see in the agent space?
So, as I said, I think the models will just get better and better. But I think a lot of it will revolve around converging towards the tools and concepts that these use and actually be able to use those much more effectively than we do today. Because I think we're on the right path, but it's just not clicking entirely yet. But I think we will see that it will start clicking probably before summer.
That's a good prediction. Let's see. Very verifiable.
It's on camera. So.
Same question for you, Daniel.
No, I think that we have very much the same timeline. And we need to make it click before summer, basically. And a lot of people are in the same situation. So I think it's really, really going to happen.
Wonderful. Maybe we need to have a half-year trend seminar. Let's see how, depending on how fast things go.
A failure seminar at summer. It didn't work.
Anyway, I want to thank you very much for coming here, Aaron, and best of luck in your future endeavors with agents.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. So if you haven't already sent in questions in the Q&A, we would warmly welcome them now because we do have a few minutes left. But while you think of those questions, we also want to get your input because we have prepared a little Menti for you all. So please scan the QR code with whatever device you have available or join at menti.com and fill in the code showed on the screen. Because this is the first time we actually are doing this kind of Menti for you as an audience. And that is because, of course, we're here. We have some insight into the ecosystem, but I'm sure all of you that are attending here today also think about these questions and are interested. So we wanted to know two questions mainly, and that is, what trend would you add to this year's list? What did we miss or what did we omit knowingly? And then secondly, and you'll be able to fill in the second question right after the first one, that is, what will you be what will you be talking about this time next year? So what do you think is going to be the big thing in February 2027? So we're going to ask you to fill out both those questions, and as they start appearing, we're going to take a look at your answers on the screen. Oh wow, first answer is a dot. Let's see if someone else fills in
Perhaps
more.
to represent some uncertainty. We don't really know,
Exactly.
right? We're talking about something that is moving at such a speed that we can't really predict it. Apart from what we said earlier, basically, some trends will sort of stay the same.
For sure, yes. We started seeing a couple of answers here. Art generation versus human creativity.
Yeah.
I think that's something that was talked more about a couple of years ago, like when ChatGPT first came. I haven't seen as much discourse in this area.
Yeah.
What is your take on that?
So I think it's sort of... When we got ChatGPT, it was a huge change, and then we quickly got used to it. Basically, people are not responding in such a way, the same way to AI-generated text and so on anymore. Especially if they know it's been generated or curated by a human. And I think that we're going there in terms of other pieces of not necessarily art, but other pieces of medium as well. However, I think the art generation and the discussion around that is a very, very important one, because it's a fundamental place for humans, basically.
For sure. And I know that this is a bit of a plug for AI Sweden project, but we do have a current project called Recreate, which is focusing on AI in creative industries, and not to mention art and both like films and so on. So there are actually a lot of conversation happening. We have recordings from previous events. So I really recommend Googling the Recreate project to get more information on that topic.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at some more topics in the answers here. What do we have?
I think the software development reinvent is perhaps going to be on the map. It's something that we talked a little bit about when we discussed trends and things like that, and we can see that the tooling we have now will absolutely revolutionize software engineering, software development, and software as a service companies, all of these things basically. But we're not quite there yet. Perhaps with the lessons learned now during the next year and so on, this might be a really, really, really big topic.
Yeah, I am also seeing a big shift when it comes to software. I think people are talking sort of about a December 2025 moment when Anthropic released their new Opus model. Yeah. And when talking to startups, I do see that suddenly it's not like speculation anymore. It's actually being used in a substantial way to automate their business.
Absolutely, and we sort of passed a tipping point. It was usable before, but it sort of gained enough capabilities, enough reasoning, long-term reasoning capabilities, enough context window, all of these technical things to sort of fall over a cliff, basically. Now it's not only sort of viable, but it's really what we should be leveraging for the next generations of software systems. So that's a huge shift, and it's going to have huge implications.
Yeah, I think the software industry is going to be one of the most interesting to follow this year. A lot's going to happen.
Yeah, and other industries will have to learn from it, because it's going to happen in other industries.
Of course, there's going to be ripple effects as well. Wonderful. There's so many interesting topics here. I don't know if we can scroll a little in the Menti. Nope, not possible. I get that from technicians. We're going to look at the first ones.
Right.
So, hardware availability and shortages. I think it's super interesting, especially related to embodied AI, of course. And that is, of course, related to a global, trade and so on. So that's also related to the topic we had at the very beginning.
Part of it is what Jed has sort of on her top of her wish list, basically, that we would invest more in. And we can see now that access to memory, access to chips, etc., etc. I mean, it's getting harder to get the compute and memory that you actually want. So what does that mean for the industry? What does that mean for different regions in the world, etc., etc.? So, yes, very, very interesting topic.
Definitely. I can see we managed to scroll a little bit finally. So we do have more talking about coding and code applications. We've been covering that, but it's interesting that many of you have that opinion. I also see some about trustworthiness. And
which is partly what Aaron was talking a little bit about, right? So how do you build these systems in auditable, trustworthy and robust ways? All of these things are not completely separate concepts here, basically. We are very, very overlapping, and there will be necessary to actually scale this.
We also have someone talking about AI in science, so I guess we have to invite Malin back next year to talk about research and AI, basically.
Exactly.
I wish we would have time to ask her that as well. All right. I think maybe we should head on to the next question and see if we have any interesting answers. They should already be there. Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, for this question, I do want to invite Mauricio into the conversation, because you're, of course, going to be part of planning that next year's mission. So you've been sitting behind the scenes, following and listening. Out of the answers you see to this, what pops your interest, and what do you think is going to be a hot candidate for next year?
I kind of like, this AGI one really sticks out for me, because I've been thinking about this for quite some time already, thinking about whether this is just essentially just another marketing term that I guess the big firms are using to finance their whole operation, and even pushing beyond that to ASI, and what is the relationship between them. And I essentially keep coming back to the idea that, as I've said in several other occasions, right? I mean, AI, as we know it, has a very jagged performance surface, in the sense that it does very well in certain things, but in other things it just fails, at times still catastrophically, right? And so it completely underperforms our expectations. And I think as we get closer to a point where that is no longer the case, then I do question whether our definition of AGI will essentially change to that. So basically thinking about, can we envision a reality where models simply don't fail as catastrophically as they do now, because we enforce it, or because of emergent properties, or whatever, and thinking about a society where that's essentially the case, right? And that's not something that we've had to sort of face until now. We've been able to essentially put off this fear, and basically say, okay, well, these are non-deterministic systems, and they kind of do what they want, and it's great when they work, and it's not so great when they don't, but it's kind of like part of their properties. And the question for me, or the observation from my side, is that it's probably not always going to be the case, regardless of what we call it. So I think that for me is the one that really sticks out.
All right. Daniel, how about you? Do you want to riff on what Mauricio said, or do you have your own little favorite?
No, I think, this is sort of a continuation, but if you sort of look into the topic, what we will be talking about next year, this year we sort of has let's say, technology trends, inherent to AI, embodied AI. We have lots of opportunities there, agent and agentic systems. These will probably be around AI in science as well, basically. And then we had a different kind of a topic as well, that's not driven by AI or the AI domain itself, but the geopolitical shift. Difficult to speculate what these might be, but if you look at these things, how to find jobs is a different one. Then we're talking about the actual real consequences of AI. And I think that will pop up more and more. We haven't really seen these things with these capabilities deployed at scale yet. So all of the talk about consequences and things like that have been pretty speculative. I think that during this year we will start to see the beginning of the real actual effect at a larger scale, and we will start talking about the actual consequences of AI for jobs, for the rest of society, etc., etc., etc. So I think that's perhaps the biggest takeaway for me in terms of topics.
Yeah, I've actually been super interested in this job topic in the last few weeks and read up on it. And of course, it's hard to figure out what the true signal is, what it entails, because we've had so many, tech companies announcing layoffs, alluding to AI, but, never have it confirmed. And it's dubious. But now recently we've seen like some actual research from Stanford, led by Erik Brynjolfsson, who have actually shown that we have seen a decrease in employment of junior developers in the US, and it is an accelerating trend. It's not going as fast in Europe yet, but we can assume we're going to follow the US suit. And what we see there, it's not only due to, in financial and economical factors, it's actually also AI that is having an effect.
Yeah.
So where that's going to end up, we don't know yet, but we're starting to see it. And I think that's going to be very interesting in a year when we have even more data and see where it's headed for real.
Absolutely.
Well, very well. I think we have time to scroll a little bit and look at a few more answers here before we should move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I do think that one thing that to continue on that topic, not seeing as many junior developers hired, for example. There is one topic here about young generation skill set development to compete against AI, or rather perhaps also being developed to complement AI, so to speak. Because if you don't get a junior position, how do you get to be in that senior position so that you can actually be the director of lots of AI agents that help you do a huge amount of work, basically. So these are definitely issues that we're going to have to tackle. Otherwise, we're going to have a very old generation just growing older and older and older and doing these things, and no new people coming in. That's not good for anyone. So we're going to have to start thinking seriously about these things.
Yeah, or we have junior people that never got the training in senior positions, which end up meaning we make a lot of mistakes and it's costly.
That sounds
there's
absolutely
like
terrible.
No good scenarios in that one.
It sounds like a catastrophic scenario. So, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So I feel like we have a lot of themes that remind us of this year's actually. So I want again talking about like sovereignty and how the US tech company influence. So maybe that's something we have to revisit next year. Let's see about that.
Yes.
But that's a long one. How to maintain the ability to validate complex knowledge and recommendations when AI tools are an integrated part of businesses.
Yeah.
Also a very interesting topic.
Yeah. And again, these are some of the scaffolding around these systems that we just need to figure out. And these will be, of course, very, very complex systems interacting with each other, and especially at organizational borders and stuff like that. What do you actually do? What kind of data do you share? And how do you keep track of things? So, yeah, it's going to be a huge challenge. It's difficult to say where we actually end up, but it's very, very interesting to follow.
For sure. So we have a few minutes left from the trend seminar, and our idea is to focus on some audience questions. So I know we have had one or two in the chat, or in the Q&A. So this is your time to ask any other questions for Daniel, Mauricio, and myself. To start with, we have one question that we did talk a little bit before, but there's another one coming up on my screen here, and that is what progress is there in embodied AI that is not purely probabilistic? And that's maybe a question we should start with Mauricio to answer.
Yeah, so I think when reading this question, the one thing that does come to mind, and especially this past year, has been the topic of reinforcement learning from verifiable rewards, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it essentially just highlights how having hybrid systems. So the idea that, as said, your brain your LLM is interacting with something that's deterministic, like some sort of model checker or logic checker. How this has fundamentally changed the game in many respects. And in this past year, I think there's been a lot of research into, really trying to explore the limits of this. So, well, I'm not entirely aware of what's sort of like going on the deterministic side of things, like what exactly the progress is in terms of like these deterministic systems that are essentially interacting with the models. It seems like a lot of the research and a lot of the novelty at the moment is coming from the interaction with the actual models themselves, with the probabilistic engines here, and essentially the going back and forth. So we know, for example, that 2 years ago, the math models that did, again, also perform very well at the mathematics Olympiad, these were these type of systems, right? These were neurosymbolic systems that were going back and forth between these two things and led to very impressive results. So I think it's mostly, I guess, an integration question now. It doesn't surprise me because, well, like many other things at the moment, a lot of things are still engineering questions, right? And I think this is no different. It's basically just trying to fit two puzzle pieces together and find the most optimal and efficient way to do that. And yeah, so it's not surprising. I think it's really great, and I don't think we still have reached the end of what's possible here.
Wonderful. Anything you would like to add to that question, Daniel?
Well, I do think that there is, of course, there will be in AI probabilistic components. We do learn things from data. We might have to use randomization and things like that to actually evoke some more, let's say, creativity in the models so that we actually get the results that we want, etc., etc. But I do think that we will start seeing a push now from perhaps not eliminating probabilistic approaches, but rather making them repeatable in a deterministic sense. So once you've found a solution, you should not expect a different solution every time you run the system. And that's a little bit what Aaron was actually alluding a little bit to as well, basically. These things are great at finding out solutions and things like that, but how do you actually make them repeatable, for example, in code? And do that again and again and again so that we have trustworthy, reliable systems. And I think we're going to see a huge push here this year.
I'm looking forward to that. We do have one more question I can see here, and that is AI security a relevant topic for the everyday man? Is it the equivalent to cybersecurity for software or something more?
Well, I think that, yeah, it's a very good question because cybersecurity is not something that we as consumers often worry about. We have solutions that take care of it for us, basically, that watches over our cloud systems, parts of our laptops and things like that, although we do need to stay vigilant and do the right things and things like that. I think that this is a little bit different, though, especially when we move towards the agentic part and you allow these agents to do things on your personal behalf. That's going to change the game completely. Because if you let an agent do something, that agent might let someone else do something, etc., 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 and then all of a sudden you have a very difficult chain of events, possibly, to control. So I think we're going to be forced into thinking way more about security because it becomes more personal. I do think that you're going to see a few examples of things going horrifically wrong, but hopefully we can actually learn to interact with these systems and actually develop some kind of trust model for us to who do we trust and who do we give our trust to in a good way.
What's your take on it, Mauricio?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting question, especially because even just a couple of months ago, there was a study released by Anthropic that actually showed that using models in an offensive sense is actually now profitable for the first time in history, right? And they also showed that the capacity of and the capability of offensive models is increasing faster than the capability of the average models, right? And that, I think, if that trend sort of continues, means that a couple, years down the road, we're going to be in big trouble because we won't have the capacity to defend across a lot of these attacks. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult topic because obviously it's something that sits behind the scenes. I think we need a lot of education about it, of essentially training people what to expect, not to expect, and of course, implementing very strict standards, building in security capabilities from the design perspective, not just sort of ad hoc at the end of the development cycle, but actually building in these capabilities and building in the research that is going there from the very beginning, I think is quite crucial. It's a, I think, underdeveloped area of research at the moment, and I think this is where we need to focus, I think, quite a bit.
So we are basically in an arms race when it comes to AI and security. And I totally agree with you, Daniel. We will have scandals where there are big security breaches or whatever. If we don't have that training in place that Mauricio is talking about and the knowledge needed, how big could the consequences be? That sounds like it could have companies would instinctively go away from AI because they're scared, no?
Yeah, probably. But I think that this is a very, very immature business so far. So if you have some companies that have some real issues, some problems, they might pull back or actually disappear because no one trusts them anymore. You're going to have $100 to sort of fill their place. So everybody wants to be in this space when it starts to work. So it's I think that we're going to see continued push in this direction, even if you get some kind of hiccups.
Yeah, very wise conclusion. I can see we have another audience question that's popped up on my screen here, and that is, what would you advise politicians and government to implement in order to AI upskill the entire country population? That's a big one. Maybe we should start with Mauricio on this one, because I bet you both have opinions.
Yeah, this is a good one, and I've heard this analogy used in the past, and I think it's apt to a certain point here, which is that, you know, if you're in our current society, if you want to drive a car, you need to get a license for this, right? It's not something that you simply are allowed to do. And I think as AI models in particular become more integrated in society and more capable, then that just increases the level of responsibility that its users need to be aware that they have when they're interacting with these systems. So education I think, plays a very big role here. I think we need to slowly move out of the mentality of having that our society is composed of AI natives versus non-AI natives, so people who are simply understanding this. We need to really think about a future where we understand everybody in a society is going to be essentially born and raised with these tools completely made available to them. And that needs to be reflected, I think, in the education system. That needs to be reflected in, I guess, the incentives that we're giving to people to actually learn behind the scenes what is sort of going on a little bit. Now, of course, I don't mean not everybody needs to become an AI researcher, but at least there should be some level of I guess, understanding that that should be made available to people to really understand, I guess, at least the very basics of what to expect, what not to expect.
No, perfectly agree. I do think that if you look back in time, and it's not that long, 25, 30 years or something like that, when we really needed to get personal computers and internet out to people for them to actually start learning these things. That was a slightly different thing, because that was hardware, that was connections, that was infrastructure that you needed to build. You're now just usually a subscription button away on the internet to actually get access to these things and start experimenting with them. So that part is incredibly different. I do think that we had a little bit of the similar situation, for example, with social media and things like that, and we sort of failed there because we should have been telling people a little bit more about what are the big societal consequences and how to actually utilize these things, etc., etc., etc. So I do think we have a chance here to be a little bit ahead of the curve still. However, I would like to say, though, that one thing that AI Sweden and Sweden in general can do to actually get this rolling within the population is not to focus just, or perhaps even mostly, on the risks of AI, and start talking about it in a positive, enabling manner. Because if you do that, you might get the people that don't really like new things and risks and things like that to actually try it. If we just talk about the negative things, we're going to lose the whole part of the population that are perhaps a little bit more risk averse, and we need them to be part of this.
I completely agree. And as an AI educator working mainly with small and medium-sized businesses, I see like that the early adopters, they already are on it and getting it.
And they will do it anyway,
of
right?
Of course.
It doesn't matter.
Now it's the people that are a bit later on the trend, still might be interested or not interested at all, that we need to address. And in order to get them to bother at all, all. It needs to be very like specific to their needs. It needs to be actionable and easy enough. And I do agree with you with the risks, like we can't solely focus on them, but there is a large portion of people that are scared. So we need to kind of address that, gather credibility, and then educate. And that is how you need to do it. But yeah, this question, of course, is more directed towards like politicians. How can we get the people in power to make this happen?
Yeah.
How would you address the politicians?
I think that, just sitting down an hour or two every once in a while and talking to them about current developments and things like that. I mean, that helps a lot, right? Listening to a seminar like this, and then perhaps being able to ask questions and things like that. If we have that kind of curiosity, if we have that kind of feedback, I think they will be or are better prepared to address these issues, basically, because they will be on top of it.
Yeah. So everyone in the audience can send an AI Sweden course to your local politicians. We have lots of resources online, so that's one way to begin. But jokes aside, we do have another last question, I believe, because our time is running out. And that is about agent governance and prompting. And that is, are models in a position to say, I don't know, and can we verify or quantify this? That's very related to Aaron's topic here.
Yeah.
So, shall we start with you, Daniel?
Yeah, well, I do think that we're getting there. I don't think we're ever gonna be in a perfect scenario for all kinds of solutions and things like that, because these things are now starting to become very, very human. We are also not experts in describing exactly what we do know and what we don't know. But if you take these kinds of measures that Aaron was talking about, you can actually force these things to say that I have no information basis for telling you this. And that is sort of what we can do in this situation. And I don't think we're too far from that. I would also like to say that they're getting better and better at actually, saying I don't know, or actually not just saying that's a great idea, but actually pushing back. And that's just how these things are trained nowadays compared to how they were trained before.
For sure. All right. I want to thank you a lot, Mauricio, and also Daniel, for answering all these questions. And I'm sure there were more that we didn't have time for. I hope the conversation can continue in real life or on our various platforms. This trend seminar has been recorded, so we will be releasing the full video and also highlighted sections, so you can share that with all of your colleagues and friends that missed out and you think should listen to this seminar. So with that being said, I would like to thank you everyone in the audience for attending, and an extra big thank you to all our panelists and speakers, and of course to my wonderful co-hosts and co-organizers, Mauricio and Daniel. Thank you very much, and see you all next year in the next trend seminar.
See you.